Have you ever stopped to think about what connects something like bread, a spoonful of sugar, and even the wood in a tree? Well, today we're diving into one of the most fundamental and honestly misunderstood building blocks of all life, carbohydrates. Let's get into it.
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? Life isn't some kind of magic. It's chemistry. It's an incredible symphony of chemical reactions, all happening at the right time. This is what our source material calls the molecular logic of life.
And what's really wild is that every single living thing, from the smallest microbe to you and me, is built from non-living stuff. We're talking about key players like proteins, lipids, and of course, the star of today's show, carbohydrates.
So these molecules follow a set of rules, interacting in these predictable, logical ways to create everything we see. And today, we're going to unpack a huge piece of that logic. Carbohydrates are literally everywhere. They're the foundation of so much of our food, mostly coming from plants. We're talking about some of the most common things you can think of, like the sugar in your coffee or the starch in your pasta.
But what is a carbohydrate really? I mean, the name itself seems like a pretty big clue, but as you're about to see, that clue is actually kind of misleading. See, way back when, chemists noticed a pattern. A lot of these compounds seem to have a simple formula. For every carbon atom, there was basically a water molecule attached. So they thought, aha, hydrates of carbon, or, carbohydrate. Made perfect sense at the time.
And at first, this looked like a home run. Take glucose, probably the most famous carbohydrate out there. Its formula is C6H12O6. You can see it right there. It fits the C6H2O6 pattern perfectly. It seemed like they'd found a simple, elegant rule for an entire class of molecules.
So, case closed, right? Well, science is never that easy. This is where that simple logic starts to get a little more interesting. Let's really put this hydrate of carbon idea to the test. And boom, right away, the old definition hits a wall. Check out acetic acid. That's the stuff that makes vinegar sour. Its formula totally fits the rule, but it is absolutely 100% not a carbohydrate. So that tells us the formula alone just isn't enough. And to make it even messier, there are actual card-carrying carbohydrates like rhamnose that completely ignore the rule. Its formula doesn't fit that simple pattern at all, so the old definition fails from both sides. It's a total bust. Okay, so that means we've got to throw out that simple formula. We need a much better, more precise chemical definition. We have to look at what these molecules actually are, structurally. And here it is. Now, I know that sounds like a total mouthful, but don't worry about the jargon. The big takeaway here is that we're not just counting atoms anymore. We're looking at the shape and structure. A true carbohydrate has very specific chemical parts that define how it acts. It's a definition based on what the molecule does, not just its ingredient list. So, now that we have a solid definition we can work with, we can finally start to organize all these different carbohydrates. We can build a sort of family tree for them, based on what happens when you try to break them down with water, which is a process called hydrolysis. This whole family tree breaks down into 3 main branches. We start with the absolute simplest units, the monosaccharides. Then we have short little chains of them, called oligosaccharides. And finally, you get the huge complex chains called polysaccharides. Let's take a quick look at each one. All right, first up, monosaccharides. Think of these as the individual Lego bricks of the carbohydrate world. They are the simplest, most basic unit you can have. You cannot break them down into anything smaller. There are about 20 of these that exist in nature, but you'll for sure recognize some of the most common ones. Glucose, which is your body's #1 fuel source, fructose, which is the sugar that makes fruit sweet, and ribose, a critical piece of our very own genetic code. Okay, next up are the oligosaccharides. So if monosaccharides are single Lego bricks, these are like snapping just a few of those bricks together. When you break them down, you get somewhere between 2 and 10 of those single monosaccharide units back. The most common ones you'll run into are the disaccharides, which just means they're made of 2 units. For example, sucrose, that's just plain old table sugar, is made of 1 glucose and 1 fructose linked together. Then you have something like maltose, which is just 2 glucose units holding hands. And finally, we get to the heavyweights of the family, the polysaccharides. These aren't just a few bricks clicked together. This is the entire Lego castle. They are enormous molecules, made by linking hundreds or even thousands of monosaccharides into these long, complex chains.
And this is where it gets really cool. Because even though they're all made of the same simple sugar building blocks, these polysaccharides do wildly different things. Starch is how plants store up energy. Cellulose is what gives plants their structure. It's what makes trees strong. And glycogen is like our body's personal quick access energy reserve. It's just amazing how arranging the same bricks in different patterns creates such different results.
Now, there's one last really practical way to classify carbohydrates that you probably do every single day without even realizing it. And it all comes down to taste.
It's super simple, really. The monosaccharides and oligosaccharides, those smaller ones, are generally sweet tasting. We call them sugars. But the polysaccharides, those huge complex chains, are not sweet at all, so they get called non-sugars. When you taste the sweetness in a piece of fruit, you're tasting mono and oligosaccharides. But the starchy part of a potato, that's a non-sugar polysaccharide.
So we've gone on this whole journey from a simple but flawed definition to this huge, diverse family of molecules, all built from simple repeating parts. From that single brick of glucose to the massive skyscrapers of starch and cellulose, these compounds are just absolutely central to the molecular logic of how life works.
And it really makes you wonder, right? The entire mind-boggling complexity of a living system is built on rules just like these, simple units combining to create incredible structures. It all comes back to that beautiful molecular logic. So the real question is, what other elegant rules are still out there just waiting for us to figure them out?